I'm Rob.
I'm E.
And I'm Damon.
Welcome to the next movement, folks.
The only distance is physical. The only distance is in miles. Because the distance between you and I is a fiction. What we are speaking of is proximity. Proximity creates empathy, a closeness in heart, nerve, and mind. So expand outward. Reach out, for proximity is closer than you think. We laugh, play music, and tell stories. We grow and we gain. We learn and we see, despite the miles, we were never really distant. Huh.
We have Damon Locks with us tonight. Damon, thank you so much for being here. We're real excited to chat with you.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm not going to be shy. I'm in love with this new record, List of Demands. It's one of my favorite things from the past couple of months. I'm really excited to chat with you about it.
Wow, I really appreciate that. That's super exciting to me.
Let's just jump right in, talk about the record a bit. The first track on the album is called Reversed.
Mm-hmm.
And it implores the listener to seriously consider the quote unquote impossible situation that we're in. It's sobering to hear you use this word impossible. It would suggest that there's no way out. The only way is through. And then the following songs almost feel like a field guide for navigating this impossible situation. But the first step is acceptance. This is where we are. And there's a weight connected to this track. It feels heavy. I have to assume this was in part the intent to communicate the gravity of things from the start.
Well, it was actually one of the last songs that I created for the record. And then it seemed like kind of a mission statement. So I needed to put it first, you know? So, yeah, I think there is a gravity towards it. I mean, there is a gravity, meaning that, yeah, we are here. This is what, I mean, we can have all kinds of theories, but at the end of the day, this is what America voted for. And so we're here and we're gonna have to do something.
Just to echo what Rob said, List of Demands is incredible. And it feels like it's the kind of project that really encouraged you to utilize all of your identities and outlets to create it. As an educator, how did you approach this album and who did you envision your students would be?
I took about 2 years to make this record. Whilst doing this record, I was still actively at Stateville Correctional Center. I spent the last 10 years working at Stateville, teaching art through a program called Prisoner Neighborhood Arts and Education Project. And whilst working on that, I was still there. I was also teaching at the School of the Art Institute. I was teaching improvisation there. And an important part of the project, I think, turned out to be the Artist Constitution. Have you guys seen the Artist Constitution? It came with the record. So if you get the vinyl, you get an Artist Constitution. And my last class at Stateville was a class that created the Artist Constitution. It was a summer class. It was about 7 weeks long. And I had some guys in my class that I've been working with for 10 years, and some guys that were brand new, and some guys that were in between. And I decided, I was like, let's make a document that really states the intentions of work on the inside. What should artwork made on the inside do and be like? And that was a really great experience. We really teased out every word of what their principles and their aspirations and their demands were. And I think that had a huge influence over me as I was working on this project. And my list of demands on the record were like time, future, form, beauty, and light. You know, don't quote me on that, but those are basically what they were. And it was amazing to create a list of demands alongside of them for like what they wanted their art to do and what kind of ownership they could have over their work, even being behind bars.
Mm.
But so I think it was like that 10 years of work really influences my work overall. It changed my work completely. My first semester there in 2014 changed the way I thought about the work I would make as an artist. It set a bar in terms of like what I will not like. I told myself the first project I did was called Freedom Time, and it was a animation project where we did 100 frames of animation with pencil on tracing paper, addressing their thoughts around freedom and time from the perspective of guys that have life sentences. And the project was so impactful to me that I was like, cool, from now on, I can't do less than this. This is the bar set for it. So my challenge was, what does it look like to make artwork that meets that bar, you know? So that teaching practice really, really like set the bar and was a North Star in many ways. And who are the students for this work? I think anyone that's willing to listen, you know,
Mm.
that's what I think.
The second track on the album is called Distance, and it is my favorite. I really love this song. You define the term distance and proximity. You explain that we're not all so distant from each other as we might think, that we simply need to focus on closeness with one another to find we're more alike than we are different. I personally find so much hope in this. It's part of what has encouraged me over the past few months, namely the idea of community, people coming together in close proximity in order to see one another, recognize each other's needs, help each other meet them. We're taught to value individualism so highly, but as you say, without proximity, we can never see the whole picture. It feels like a pretty general question, but I wonder if you could talk a bit about the role community plays in both your artistry and in helping you better understand your relationship to yourself.
Well, I will take this back a little bit. As a young person getting into music, I mean, let me say that I was always into music. Like, I grew up in the 70s, and so music was kind of everywhere in the 70s. Like, I think because of technology, that was when like the stereo system at the house was pretty normal, you know, like previous to that, it wasn't a thing, but now the family house had a stereo and we had 45s, we had records, and they were like West Side Story, but they were also like, you know, the Silvers, or Stevie Wonder or 8-track tapes. So we were always listening to music. But when I started to listen to punk music and hardcore, I was around 8th grade, and I went to this special art class with high school students, and I was a junior high school student. And so all the older students started making tapes for me, and I started listening to this punk music. And I was really drawn to the like kind of political side of punk music. I thought that was super interesting. Along with that came like a variety of kind of artistic ideas, but I found out that like the Sex Pistols drove people crazy. Like everyone was like, "Oh my God, we got to ban these people. They're crazy." And then on another side of things, the Specials and other bands like that, like the Specials and the two-tone movement, like changed the way people dressed. You know, there was a whole thing where the kids dressed like the guys in the band, and I thought this is super interesting. And as I got older, Public Enemy would put out albums and they'd end up on the news. And I was like, this is really incredible. Like these people are making music that like impacts the lives of people. But none of the music like I was making, even though I put political ideas around it, I couldn't see an impact outside of the like small community of musicians that I knew. And when I quit my job as a music publicist in 2007, 2008, I really had to think about what kind of artist I wanted to be. I'm a visual artist and a musician. And so I put myself to the task of like figuring out what that looked like. And what that looked like was I wanted to connect to community. And in order to connect to community, I had to figure out who was my community and what does that look like? So originally I was like, I want to do artwork that ends up in buses and subway stations and things like that, because I was like, this is where people are, you know? So I started off by working with a lot of teachers and talking to students and making work um, around the kind of issues that students were like talking about. I did a whole series of like photographic collages with Double Dutch. Those pieces were super beautiful. I really loved them. And after my first semester at Stateville through PNAP, I made that Freedom Time piece, the animation piece that I mentioned. I started using sound to have conversations with people. So I started doing performances where I would like use loops and synthesizers and things like that. Low tech synthesizers. I'm not like a super synth guy, and I would like pull out my records, my archive of records, and whether it was like Ruby D and Ozzie Davis talking about lynching via Langston Hughes, or maybe it would be Angela Davis talking about incarceration, or any number of folks. I would play text off of turntables and then have these loops going on behind them. What I found happened was people would like close their eyes and they would listen, and then after the show people would like talk about it. And so I continued to do this in different spaces, and the same thing would happen. People would have these conversations about the content of what was being shared. Because of this practice, I was asked to collaborate with a West Side dance company called Move Me Soul in the Austin neighborhood. So it's an all Black dance company, and we had to make this response to an exhibition by this guy named Merce Cunningham, which was an experimental, a famous experimental like white dancer. And we were working on this material, and I was making this material just as Black as I could. Like I was giving them samples and stuff from all the Black arts from as far back as the 30s with Duke Ellington, all the way through the 70s up until now. I had like a Kerry James Marshall quote in it, who's a Chicago painter. And we went and performed in the MCA and performed this piece, and it was amazing. And so I continued to work with Move Me Soul, and I started a residency at the Hyde Park Art Center, which is on the south side of Chicago. And people were coming in and out of the studio. It was like I left my doors open. And I just started to like really having discussions with people and sharing ideas and working closely in collaboration with them. And I continued to work in prison, and I started teaching more. And so I was sharing the conversations I was having in prison with students in high schools and at the art center and with Move Me Soul. And then I started putting together Black Monument Ensemble. And that group was made up of a bunch of Black Chicagoans from all over Chicago who I basically never met before. I think like one of them I had known but never played with, and the other ones I saw them and I was like, I think this person might be right, and formed this kind of community of players to play with. And I think that's just been that's been my method, like make strong work that you're responsible for, but then build projects with other people, and that work is going to be stronger because those other people are putting their intentions and their skills into the thing. So it's been a really rich experience to build the work in the last 10 years or so, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And plus, I think I will say that I came up in the kind of like rock-based scene, and generally those scenes were like 4 guys that all had kind of a democratic, well, I did my thing, you do your thing, we'll do that, we'll all agree to do that. But I had to really reframe what that looked like with a group like the Black Monument Ensemble, because though I was in charge, I had to create a scenario where I took care of the group and You know, in the band situation, we'd be sleeping on floors and driving in vans and things like that. And I was like, I don't want my group to have to go through that anymore. Like, how about if everything's nice? How about how about if you get treated well? And what will you perform like if you get treated well and with care? And someone's so I just feel really lucky right now that there's like a large community, not only with Black Monument Ensemble, but there is a wonderful community of artists in Chicago to collaborate with.
Your work contributes to conversations, which leads to community, and that leads to more work, and it just sort of like feeds itself.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I would say it was a method, but at this point, it's just like a way of life. This is all I know. You know.
There was a couple conversations happening on List of Demands. For me, it feels like there are times when you are talking with yourself and when you're engaging with community. There are these moments when you're looking inwards and reflecting on how you're showing up in the world. And then there's an examination of the collective and how community must move to create positive change. What do you hope people take away from these dialogues?
I just hope that I hope to put out work, artwork, music work, teaching work that helps move the needle forward, that's adding something to the conversation, that is not just restating the issue, but hopefully helping things move forward. Because, I mean, I think in many ways that's how I think about the kind of archival material that I use. I think about like allowing those voices to be present and to continue their message forward. So I put my material next to their material, and hopefully we'll keep moving it forward, So I'm trying to continue a conversation. There's a song that I have called Power, and it's a Black Monument song. And it says the struggle is not empty, but it's the power that we bring into be. So even though it may seem difficult at this moment, you're putting something out there to bring that power to being for the next people to fortify the next people.
I want to go back to Distance for a minute. I've thought a lot about the things that you name in this song since I first heard it. A lot of what Rob has already discussed in his question, especially around the concept of physical distance, creating this lack of empathy and understanding. Maybe this is a really naive thing to say, but sometimes I think music can help solve this, even if it's just on a small scale. A project like yours, List of Demands, is one with the power to challenge and educate listeners. And I was wondering if you view your art as this type of resource, and have you witnessed it being accessed in this way?
I mean, I agree with you. I think arts in general create that proximity. I have seen it in the work that I've done on the inside. So you make work on the inside, you bring it out, and then people see it. They see the creativity. They see the thought process of someone that they've never met before, and all of a sudden you feel closer to them. You care about who they are and what will happen to them, and that was a really important thing that we always did with PNAP. We brought the work on the inside to the outside, and I've seen it and I've experienced it. When I experience someone's art, their music, their visual art, their acting, I care about them and I want to know more about what they're thinking about. So yes, I think that is the case, and I feel like if you ask questions also with your work, then people can stay with it a little longer. If you tell people the answers, then what is there to linger with? So try to create work that's stimulating, that asks questions, that is close to your intentions, follow your intentions while making the work, and hopefully that will translate. And sometimes if you do it well, then like what you guys are doing, you read back the very intentions that I was thinking about when putting the work together. And that to me is amazing.
Study to show thyself intuition exists. Iridescent orb, the third eye of bull's horns. A closed mouth nestles the sacred on the bed of the tongue. Listen. The whisper that bellows beneath the conscious in the shadow grows the seed of God shifting you. To tune the ear is to sit at the altar of silence.
At the halfway mark of the album, there's a track called High Priestess, which you turn over, at least the vocals, to the poet Krista Franklin. It's a beautiful track. Their voice is soft, placed over these birds chirping and ambient sounds. At one point, they say to tune the ears to sit at the altar of silence, and everything drops out except the birds and what sounds like running water. I wondered what made this track important to include on the album and at this point on the album.
Well, there's a lot of instincts that go on with that thought process. Krista is a visual artist and poet that I've known for a long time, and we have collaborated. I think maybe only once, but we're good friends, and the collaboration has always seemed implied, you know. And so when doing a record that was like focusing on text, I was like, I gotta include Krista, you know. And Krista is also someone that I trust their work, you know, implicitly. And so I called her up. I think I probably texted her. I explained that I was doing this project. I said, send me anything you got. Send me something you want me to work with. And she sent me that. And then I chopped it up and created this sound piece around that piece. And it was it felt very different than a bunch of the stuff on the record. And it just seemed to fit really nicely when I was sequencing at the end of the first side before you get to the second side. So it's about the halfway mark where you get taken on this more abstract, open journey. I'm really proud of that piece, and I think that Krista sounds fantastic on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I love about this project is the sort of dichotomy that it holds. Sonically, it's often loud and chaotic, yet contained within that noise are these lovely messages, at least from my perspective, of hope. The track Isn't It Beautiful might encapsulate this best for me. There are these layered samples and crashing drums, and it's pretty loud at times, yet your voice is there, encouraging the listener to notice the small and profound things around us on a daily basis. You talk about how nature wraps you in love and makes you feel safe, even when you're alone in the wilderness. You say the universe is in our eyes and thoughts. It's in the unknown cosmic meditations. It made me wonder about the practices that you've incorporated into your daily life that allow you to notice such small and profound things, and how does music contribute to that awareness?
I think for me, like my partner, you know, gets a lot of acupuncture, does yoga and Pilates, you know. I do jujitsu. But for me, I think art is the thing that slows me down. The art is the thing that makes me listen. And when I say art, I mean the music making and the visual work, because to me, it's the same. I think about translating ideas through the mediums, and whether that ends up being in a classroom or on a stage or on a piece of paper via visual work, it doesn't matter. So to me, like listening for a turn of phrase that's inspiring that I might want to sample, thinking about how a sound could do something in juxtaposition with another sound is liberating, you know, and thinking about translating that all through drawing is really amazing to me. So I feel like my traditional go-tos have always been music and visual work, and being in a place where I can really like maintain that and do it regularly is like the healthiest thing and the most like connected thing I can do. Cause I feel like everyone is creative, but everyone doesn't have the it's not available. Expressing that creativity is not available to everyone, you know, whether when they were younger, people didn't support that, or they didn't have those classes or those teachers or those mentors, those older siblings that tapped them on the shoulder and said, you should keep doing this, you know? But because I think because my mom was English teacher, when I was drawing when I was in third grade, she fully encouraged that. And by sixth grade, I was in art classes, you know? And so that was just I can be really thankful that there was someone there saying, you know, keep doing this, you know? So, and then of course, finding the punk scene, I didn't have any musical talent, but the punk scene didn't require that. So I was able to get on stage and start screaming right away. So I think, you know, for me, if it's corny or not, I think it's the arts. These are the things that help me connect.
Well, you've mentioned this a number of times already, but you know it's well publicized. This album was influenced by your work at Stateville Correctional Center, the PNAP program. I couldn't help but think about that as I was listening to the track "Holding the Dawn in Place." A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of visiting SCI Phoenix, which is the local state-run prison here in the Philly area, to participate in restorative circles with some of the men incarcerated there. And I was floored by the light that these men like held on to despite their dark circumstances. I sort of naively went into it imagining that I would need to bring them something like that, and instead left feeling changed myself
Mm-hmm.
as a result of their perspective. I wondered if the folks you worked with are aware of this project, List of Demands, and what their reaction to it has been.
Well, they're not aware, unfortunately, because the last October, the state bill shut down. I think it was no, it was, I think it was September it shut down. We were supposed to have an event in October, which we had heard that was shutting down. There'd been rumors for a year, and then it all kind of happened kind of quickly. And we had this like closing event that we were going to have in October, and Black Monument was going to play. And I've written songs for that because, in many ways, in 2014, that was the birth of the idea for Black Monument Ensemble. But so the downside of the prison closing is that I wish it was closing because we needed less prisons and people didn't want to build more prisons. But in reality, you know, the prison itself was not a healthy place for anyone to be in. So the judge ordered it closed down a month earlier than it was going to close down, and all the guys had to get shipped off to other prisons that were further away. So Stateville was already an hour outside of Illinois. I mean, outside of Chicago, and now everyone's further, which is a larger hardship for the families. So I haven't really been in contact with the guys. One of the issues is that once you sign on to working in the prison, you can't really communicate with people in Illinois state prisons. So yeah, I think, I mean, I think the word might have gotten through to people that the poster exists in the record, but I haven't actually spoken to anyone. And I think that they would be happy about it because that was the goal of the work, is to get it out there. And I feel like I was lucky enough that a filmmaker, a friend of mine, this is a standard prison story, right? But I worked really hard to get a filmmaker friend of mine into prison, into one of the classes. And I had his name on the list. We got him in, we got his equipment cleared, everything. And on the day, I go out there and I'm meeting with him to go into this class that my friend Sarah's teaching, but I've been going to every once in a while. And when we got there, his name was on the list and my name wasn't on the list. Mm. So I couldn't go in and he got in. And so he shared with me after all the material was cleared, he did this edit And one of the guys, he had asked the guys about me, and one of the guys had said that Damon is their emissary out into the world, and through me, they get to go to all these different places. So it seemed appropriate to put some of their words into the record so that I can ship out their words out along with the project.
I love that.
You've said that the list of demands you're naming on the album are not just yours. This list is in conveyance, in response, and in honor of all those great Black speakers that turned a phrase to generate movement and change. And we hear a lot of these voices on the project. In addition to honoring them, did you use List of Demands as a vessel to channel these important speakers and their histories so that they're not lost?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that in my thinking about sampling and my thinking about the archive, like what you get when you do sonic collages is you get the like all the emotion of where that person is coming from on that particular day. You get the recording quality that tells you something about when they are in time, you know? You also get like the like sonic color and shape of the sound. Whether it's like slightly muffled or if it's super bright or if they're outside or they're inside. And that information has to like fit with the other sounds that you put in there. So your brain as a listener has to create a whole new space for all of this information, all these different times, all these different recordings to make a new world. And my hopes and what I find when I listen to it is that all of that information is retained and you can still feel it when you hear the recording. If you hear good luck, that's all I can tell them. You know, there's a line in there. And then every time I hear that sample, like my heart breaks a little bit, you know, because I can hear the speakers, everything about the weight of the good luck. That's all I could tell them, you know? So I feel privileged to add that to my conversation, to my conversation, but also I feel like that person's voice is still doing the job that needed to get done when they recorded the thing. So being able to share that forward is an important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a timelessness to this project, to List of Demands, not just because of the samples that you're talking about and how they present the sort of lineage of like-minded thinkers, but because of the words you yourself choose to employ. What you say on this project is very much applicable to today, to right now, our current impossible situation, but seems to me also just as applicable to the 1960s as it will be to future political and social struggles. When you were creating this project, how conscious were you of making something that could be used for like generations?
Well, I would say, unfortunately, over the last bunch of years, I have been feeling like everything remains relevant for the struggles for civil rights all over the world.
Mm.
And you know, I started this exploration around 2014, 15, like asking the question about progress. Is there a thing called progress? You know? And you know, I'm not convinced that there is, you know. I think they're just different ways of framing the same story, you know. So I feel I don't think I was consciously thinking about, you know, making a record that is relevant or timeless. I just know that when I listen back to the archive of recordings that I'm pulling from, they're saying the same things that we're still saying today. And that's why it's important to hear that these things have been argued and talked about this whole time and kind of never stopped, really. But I also have to say, you know, it's, I have to stay hopeful. Like you have to do things, you know, like you have to move forward. You gotta do the best you can, you know, and you never know what's going to happen. You know, you never know what the thing that you do will, what kind of influence it will have. Like Miles Davis doesn't know never knew I listened to his music. You know, John Coltrane never knew I listened to his music. Curtis Mayfield didn't know who I was. You know, but these are people that, that are constants in my life and as inspiration. So you got to do stuff because it's the power you bring into be.
Mm. The way that you examine Black liberation throughout Lists of Demands is why I think it's such a brilliant project. It feels like to me you use every sound, every word, every sample on the project to offer this analysis on freedom, sort of constructing this timeline that allows us to see how it's been won in the past, how we're winning it now, and how we can take freedom in the future. Do you feel like your art has always been a tool that's allowed you to develop a deeper understanding of the topics you're exploring through it?
Hmm. I think I've always been working towards that. I think, as I said, in my younger days and making like punk music, I think that my intention was always to create political ideas and artistic ways to ask questions. And then I moved on to from Trenchmouth to the Eternals, and that group was like more esoteric, definitely like post punk, not really punk music, just strange music, but still kind of engaging in the thought process. I think the problem that I found in Trenchmouth was that the venue of like punk shows was not like a space to like have these conversations really.
Hmm.
It wasn't really being picked up on. It wasn't really being engaged with, whether it was just too loud or too screamy, or that there was not the like, variety of like cultural influences that might grab onto it. So when I started on this kind of newer journey in the last 10, 11 years, I needed to like kind of reset the dials, set the dials to zero and start anew and be like really kind of thoughtful about where I was presenting the work and who was making the work and what the dialogues were going to be and what the conversations were going to be and how can you put this work into a particular place and so that the conversations could happen.
Mm.
So I over the years I had to learn how to create the context for the artwork. You can't just make the work and be like, okay, y'all do the rest. Like you have to be able to like put it in places. You have to make it accessible to people. You have to like create the scaffolding so that the ideas can sit someplace and people can see it. So that's just something that I've been working on for a while. And also, truth be told, like, it's like that process is a learning process. But then I also had to put myself into spaces to learn.
Mm.
Like, just a quick side, when I quit my job, I was making artwork. When I quit my job, I was like, okay, well, I don't have a job right now, so let's figure out what your art is going to be. So I started making this visual artwork. And I was really inspired by an artist named Emery Douglas, who did all the artwork for the Black Panther newspaper.
Yes.
And so I was making work, and then people would look at it and be like, "Oh, that looks real '60s." And I was like, "Cool, all right." But the problem is, I knew that I didn't know anything, and I was like, "I need to know more personally, so that when I make the work, it's got more behind it." So I could make the exact same piece of artwork, but having all this knowledge and all this experience that experience has brought, makes the work deeper by that. So not only did I have to figure out how I was going to make work and how I was going to frame it, where I was going to put it, but I also have to I had to gain knowledge and experience and put myself into places. You can't just say I want to make music that's connected to community and not make any efforts
Mm.
towards being involved in community. So it took time. It took
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
I want to go back to the first song on the album, Reversed. On that song, you are emphasizing how we have found ourselves in this moment. You found me. I have found you. We have found ourselves. You've worked in groups and collectives, duos, but this project is your solo debut. And I'm wondering how creating this project has allowed you to find yourself in a new way.
I think I found it really interesting to like make all the musical decisions. I mean, of course, there are guests on there. There's Ben Lamar Gay, there's Krista Franklin, Macy Stewart, Ralph Darden, but still the like framework of that was up to me. And I would say, here, what song do you think this song will work for you? Do you think I'd love you to put something on this song? You know, and they would add their thing to it, but then they have the whole thing be kind of structured around my ideas, and basically I would just have the engineer to be like, do you think this works? you know so that was something that I found out. I think that it is probably the most me thing that has come out, because I made all the decisions about all the things on it. And so that's just informative to me. That's super interesting. If there's no one else saying we should go this direction, this is what it's going to sound like. This will be what it sounds like. So I found that to be really interesting. And so when I listen back to it, I go, oh yeah, I like that happened. And I'll be like, well, of course you like it, because that's your idea. So that's what I found. I mean, to me, as a collaborator by nature, I love to hear the input. I love to like have the thing shaped by collaboration. But this one was one that I was like, the shaping, the collaborations are in a more subtle way, like microphone choices, and you probably don't hear that, but the engineer will be like, I picked that microphone for his voice. It's perfect.
I'm glad you said that this was the most you project that you've put out, because I was curious about that. The liner notes on Bandcamp say that List of Demands is arguably the most Damon Locks record to date. So it sounds like part of that is true for you, because you are making most of the decisions behind, the creative direction of this project. What else about List of Demands makes that statement true for you?
I had to do a lot of research. There was a lot of like framing of this record that I really had to like look into. Like I gave it a lot of thought. Like I was reading books while I was working on this record in order to get myself in the right frame of mind for this record. I was doing some heavy research on a guy named Linton Kwesi Johnson. And Linton Kwesi Johnson, if you've never heard their work, he was a poet. He still is. He's still with us. A poet. And his most famous work happened in the late 70s, where he was a Jamaican-born Brit that read poetry over reggae music. And his poetry, he was a member of the British Black Panthers. He was super political. And I just wanted to like think about his work I wanted to think about his work and think about like what he did in the late 70s using the tools that he had, and then think about what that means for me. So that's just one example of the kind of like research I did. I think normally when a record comes out, when I'm working with other people, that's the research. We get to like bounce back and forth. I come in with my ideas, and then you come in with your ideas, and then we find the thing through those ideas. But when it was just me, I found myself reading books and watching movies and thinking about like conceptual ideas as well as like sonic ideas,
Every episode, we ask our guests to choose an album that is a favorite, personal classic, something that has informed their art, something along those lines. And so tonight, we're talking about Mixmaster Mike and Return of the Cyklops. To start, Damon, I'll just ask you, what led you to pick this album?
Well, this podcast, a lot of people have talked about a lot of amazing records. So there were some limitations, but I really like when I can. I as I said, I teach that class on improvisation, and I present Mixmaster Mike every semester. I just think that the anti-theft device, Eye of the Cyclops and Return of the Cyclops and Bangzilla, these records are incredible. And so given the opportunity, I want to be able to let people know. I mean, he's got more records than that, but I want to let people know that they should be checking these records out because they're incredible records. Sonically super exciting to me.
Yeah.
That's why I picked it.
A lot going on, in these records, which in my mind is not all that different from like some of the production, the sampling that you've been doing on some of your work. Also reminiscent of like the Bomb Squad and some other folks whose names I'm not, bringing to mind at the moment. Is turntablism like this like something that you are into in general, or is it just something about Mixmaster Mike?
Truth be told, I mean, when the turntablism thing happened, when that kind of birthed itself in the late 90s, I was listening to whatever came out, but there was something about Mixmaster Mike and Qbert, and then also Kid Koala, that like spoke a language that I really connected with. And I think that, I saw this Mixmaster Mike Kid Koala show that like blew me away, where they were performing together. Neither of them had headphones on, and they were just rocking multiple turntables together. And my mind was blown. It was just an amazing show. And I saw Mixmaster Mike several times also. But there's something that I'd say that Mixmaster Mike and Qbert do, and then Kid Koala does something slightly different, but there's like a freedom in the sound that is attractive to me, that there's a kind of a singular thought process that you can hear in the music making, like Dilla and like Madlib. You can hear that they have this trajectory that's just going, and regardless of who they're working with or whatever, that trajectory is going to be there, So, and it's kind of genius. And I mean, I say kind of genius, meaning that it is genius. So there's a wild cardness of Mixmaster Mike. He's described his process in the early days, at least, is that he imagines if aliens were to overhear this, that they might understand it, that he might be speaking to them. And I can see that. And when the stuff was coming out, people were listening to a lot of people in like the indie rock scene were listening to a lot of like experimental electronic music that was kind of noise oriented. And I was like, y'all should be listening to Mixmaster Mike, because not only is it experimental and noise oriented, but it's also funky. So y'all are missing out. And also another reason I'll bring up Mixmaster Mike, because I don't know, I feel like it's like a secret weapon in my toolbox, like the influence of Mixmaster Mike to me is very obvious to me. Like I listen to it and I go, oh man, if I could do that, that would be amazing. I feel that way about Madlib as well. Like I'll listen to Madlib and be like, Madlib is just doing on some level, So I do like to share that type of thing. To me, it's not like a mystery. It's not like you don't want to pull, like I like pulling the curtain back every once in a while, so then people can do that research and listen to it and hear something totally different from it, or get something totally different from it. And if I have a chance to praise this thought process, I will.
You just said that you saw him live. I can't remember when you say you did, but I wondered if, listening to this, like on CD, whatever, however you choose to listen to it, versus seeing it live, I imagine is a completely different experience. So I wondered if, like, hearing what he was doing then, but also seeing the movement that went into the sounds that he was creating, did that just make you feel even more drawn to his work and like what he was doing?
Yeah, I mean, if you see him do it, I don't know if you guys ever checked out a video of him performing, but if you see him do it, you will swear that you're watching it on the wrong speed. Even if you're looking at it in real life, you're gonna be
Yeah.
like, this is not possible. Like his hands are
Yeah.
moving so fast. And then there's also this like crazy stuff that like may not appear to work at first, but then your mind kind of catches up to it and figures it out. Or maybe he's doing it wrong at the beginning. I don't know. But there's some kind of these like noisy moves that happen that then like fall into the pocket. And then you're like, oh, I got it. This is what's happening. But just watching the like experimentation that he did, like to me, it's like a full homage to the turntable, like the idea of the turntable in the beginning. And this is, if you take it all away to its fullest extent, you end up at Mixmaster Mike.
Yeah, I feel like that it's just like a whole other art. Like
Yeah.
to be able to use this machine to manipulate it to create these different sounds and it's just incredible to me.
Mhm. And I wish that it did not I feel like it got kind of siloed into just a small category because hip hop doesn't necessarily need it anymore.
Yeah.
When hip hop and dance and turntablism all got kind of separated into the different
Hmm.
things, I really wish that it was a strong part of it because it's like Mixmaster Mike, Qbert, things like people like that are abstractionists. You know, they're the like abstract sound collagenists. So they're not doing the like kind of straight beats of like a Rick Rubin. They're just giving you some like crazy shit, and you gotta jump on board. I gotta say that when I heard that he was joining the Beastie Boys, I wish that they had done it differently. I know from listening to interviews that they made the tracks and then Mixmaster Mike came in and then scratched on top of the tracks. They should have just said, Mixmaster Mike, make us a whole set of tracks and then we'll rhyme on those tracks. And that Hello Nasty would have been in like a totally different
Hmm.
record that would
Yeah.
be up there with Paul's Boutique
Mm.
in a
Yeah.
totally different way. Like
Yeah.
in a sonic, like experimental way, it would have been incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Were you into the Beastie Boys at that time, or did Mike like pull you into it?
No, I was already a fan. Like when I say, to be honest, I think I was in my first year in college when License to Ill came out, and I was not about it. Like I was not about it in like a conceptual way. I hadn't listened to it,
Yeah.
but I was just like, is this like the Three Stooges of hip hop? Like I was really not happy about it. Like. Um, and they probably heard that before. And then I heard it, the new style. Like I was just like, it was impossible for me not to enjoy the new style. And then I started liking the record, and I was like, okay, but also like their performance antics, I just wasn't that particularly interested in it. And then when Paul's Boutique came around, I just thought it was an incredible record, and I felt like they were like addressing my concerns without ever hearing my concerns. And then they did Check Your Head, and they picked up their instruments, and I was like, this is an incredible record. So when I always thought Hurricane was just like a cool. He always seemed like a cool guy. But when they were gonna add Mixmaster Mike, I had already heard Anti-Theft Device and maybe this record, and so I had high hopes for it, and it didn't actually do the thing for me that I wanted it to do.
Yeah. Yeah, he's sort of like like muted in some ways, I think, in his work with the Beastie Boys.
Hypothetically, I think they probably felt super confident in what they were doing, and they didn't want to mess up the formula. So they probably just, did the tracks and had really amazing turntablists. But if you look at live recordings, they always gave Mixmaster Mike space to do the Mixmaster Mike thing. And to me, I'm like, hey, he should be doing that the whole time.
I don't know if this is current, but I feel either he did or he's currently touring with Metallica. Like, I thought that was interesting.
I believe it because he got super. From what I know, he's been super into metal a lot recently, and he does great things with metal. For me, I think the 3 records that I mentioned are my Mixmaster Mike, like Mount Rushmore, but given an opportunity, I would definitely go see Mixmaster Mike again. Now, we got a question. Was Mixmaster Mike on your radars already, or did you have to do some research and listen to this record, or did you already know it?
I'll be honest and say I actually only knew of Mixmaster Mike because of the Beastie Boys. I don't know why, but I kind of missed this whole like wave of turntablism, so didn't really get into it. So I had to go back and like listen to it for this. Really enjoy it though.
Yeah, I definitely had not tapped into this album ever before, and I'm curious how you listen to it, but it's one of those projects that I can put on and just get lost in. I'm not worried about track names or orders of songs or anything like that. I just put it on and just dive in. Like my ears are just on an adventure and from beginning until end. How do you listen to his work? Like, do you do something similar? Like, how do you engage with his projects?
I mean, I do the same actually. Like, I just put the record on and let the journey commence. Yeah. And there's always in the best stuff. There's always like some great like vocal drops from like a Dracula movie or an old sci-fi movie. And they ground you, and then you get thrown off into some other adventure, But today, in preparation for this, I pulled out the album and I put on from side A to side B, and I was like, I'm going to make mental notes in my head about different tracks just in case. And the track list didn't seem to like correspond at all to the songs. So that's another reason why I never paid attention to the thing, because there's one song, just by the way, there's a song, it says on side B, the second song on side B, it says, "Come Get Some." So I'm listening to side A, and about 4 or 5 songs into side A, there's a song that goes, "Come, get some." Boom, I was like, that song is clearly "Come Get Some." This is not side B.
How long have you had? I was going to ask what format you listened to this in, because I had a hard time finding it, honestly. How long have you had that vinyl?
I bought it when it came out. So when Anti-Theft Device, which was the first record, which is great, when that came out, I bought it. And then the Cyklops came out, which was an EP. And then like a year later, Return of the Cyklops came out with 12 inches and B-sides added to it to make it a full-length thing. So I've been buying them since they came out. I used to go to New York when I went to New York on trips. I would go and try to find turntablist cassettes in the late 90s. So I have a couple of Q-Bert and Kid Koala cassettes and Mixmaster Mike cassettes from those trips.
Nice. You guys were talking about track titles, which I also just kind of ignored, except there's a track that I was listening to it on YouTube, and there's one track where it's a little slower, and the way he was cutting things, I was like, I feel like he's talking to me, like speaking his own language right now. So I had to look and see. It's a track called Bazooka Canyon.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you guys Mixmaster Mike converts. Hopefully, everyone listening to this will go back and listen to Anti-Theft Advice, Return of the Cyclops, and Bangzilla, and then report back to me. You can
Yeah, I'm
hit
sold.
you can hit me up on Instagram on Black Monument Ensemble. Let me know what you think of the Mixmaster Mike records.
What's this is old school and have people we can have people call
Call in,
in. Yeah.
yeah, call in right now and let me know what you think of Mixmaster Mike. But so let me just say though, just so I can. So Qbert, I think I think Mixmaster Mike mentored Qbert. I think Qbert was younger. Qbert has a great Twitch that like he goes on regularly and just does scratch sets. And so they're in random times and I get like a notification and sometimes it'll be like 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll just put Qbert on and have my breakfast while there's someone scratching on the side there. It's super nice. But Qbert, I'd say that he puts out his own music and his records that he's put out have been the most like old school mixtapes, turntablism mixtapes from the 90s. So both of them fulfill this like thing that I find to be super enjoyable. And I think Kid Koala, his first tape was called Scratch, 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 Scratch. And it's this amazing mixtape. You can find it on YouTube. I highly recommend it. And it's pulling like Bjork and Phil Collins and Charlie Brown cartoons, like all these things are throughout the whole thing and could never be released for real because it has all of these samples on it. But and so that's the kind of intersection of that moment. But Kid Koala has then gone on to like music for videos, large scale theatrical performances with puppetry and video and orchestras and things. So they have all done their separate amazing trajectories coming from the turntable.
I'm glad that this wasn't on Spotify or anything like that because what I often do is if I'm listening to a new project, I'll stop, pull out my phone, see what track it is, and it'll just interrupt the process. So I put this on YouTube a couple of days ago and I just let it play and it was the best thing I could have done because I was just locked into the sound. I wasn't worried about anything else but what I was hearing, and that just makes the listening experience that much better.
Yeah, you know what's nice about having to listen to something on YouTube if you don't pay for YouTube? Like you can't touch it. I pull it up on my phone,
Right.
touch it. If I can't do anything else on my phone, because then the music will stop,
Yeah.
So it makes me listen to it.
Hmm.
I think another reason why I wanted to talk about this record is that I don't know, this record really does feel, I mean, like, I I love Liquid Swords, I love, Supreme Clientele. I realize I just named two Wu-Tang related, but I love, Low End Theory. Like I love these records, and I feel like this Mixmaster Mike record is fully hip hop. Like, but it's just this whole avenue that just didn't maintain the traction, so that there's just this lane of people that like turntablism that hold on to it. But I really just think it should be part of the conversation as much as all the other things. So I was glad to, share that, And you can find old Mixmaster Mike mixtapes on YouTube too. So as a matter of fact, I might follow up with you guys and be like, how much have you listened to? Have you listened to this? There was an interview I heard with Mixmaster Mike, and he was like, before he had turntables, before he even knew how he would make pause mixtapes, where he would just like do a blend and catch things and do another beat and unpause and so that's how deep the love for the like the sonic aspect of the hip hop was. That's how deep it was.
Somebody should make a whole documentary on pause tapes because I've heard about the process and I am like fucking blown away by it every
Yeah.
time somebody talks about it.
Pause tapes to me are like on the same level as like cutting and splicing tape. Like
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a complicated process.
Hmm.
Or it's just what you did when you didn't have the thing, you know?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
have this tape over there, a cassette that got chewed up by a tape deck. I've been using tapes a lot recently. I've been using them sonically in my solo projects, but then also been making mixtapes. I was working on one today. And one of my tapes got chewed up. So it's like all kind of crinkled and hanging out of the tape deck. I mean, out of the tape, the cassette thing. And so I was thinking about, like, it's still sitting over there, but in my mind, I was like, all I got to do is cut the things, take a slice of a little piece of tape, and then tape it together, and I can have that tape back. And I haven't done it. I haven't done that in like 35 years, you know, but it's sitting right over there, and I'm going to do it sometime in the next week because that's what I used to do. Might as well
Yep.
do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, and you right, you have that experience, that skill. I remember in college,
Do it.
when I was in college, I studied like recording in college, and this was like the early 2000s. Our professor was like making us learn how to cut and splice tape. I was like, why? We're never gonna.
I think it's super useful, actually. I think it's really great.
Yeah,
I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating how it's done. Yeah.
Well, may I ask how old each of you are?
I'm 42.
42?
I'm 44.
Okay, so I'm 56. And just as an aside, one of the things that was really exciting to me is that when I was in eighth grade, or was it seventh grade? I feel like it was seventh grade. Seventh grade, Rapper's Delight came out. And then eighth grade is when I started listening to punk music. So as I was a kid, like I bought Rapper's Delight and all these Sugar Hill records, and I was buying them alongside like all the punk records I was buying. So as I was going on, Run DMC would come out with an album, and Minor Threat and Bad Brains would come out records. So I was buying all of them simultaneously. So I had this like kind of unusual, like I always loved hip hop. Of course, it was called rap back then, but it was always in conversation the whole time with my like punk upbringing.
Mm. Yeah, less like barriers, less division between genres.
Yeah, and there was a period in the early '80s, where like right before, I guess I would say this all kind of started to jump off in the early '80s, and I think I went to my first hardcore show in February of 1983. I was 14 years old, but I think I was already listening to, I'd have to check the dates. I think I was already listening to like Rapper's Delight and things like that because in my memory, I had like sneaker roller skates, the roller skates that look like sneakers.
Yeah.
And I was like rolling around in our basement on my roller skates, like rapping all of Rapper's Delight, And I think that was pre-punk, but there was something about like when the message came out that like I was like, ooh, this is what I'm talking about. So there was this like political idea. And then I think then when the punk thing happened, I started looking. So there was always this conversation back and forth. And so I think when Public Enemy showed up, I was like, okay, we're having this conversation. I think also Rick Rubin's production. And then there was also like this aspect of Def Jam because as far as I know, they ripped off the Junkyard Band, which was a go-go band from DC, and they only have one single Sardines, and with the word on the flip side, but they recorded the whole album, and they didn't release the album; they just released the single. But right after that, Beastie Boys and Run DMC had go-go samples in their music, and so I was checking for I was like, ooh, this go-go music, this is hip hop, there are guitars in this, and then this is super noisy. So all of that was a big thing. And probably because of that, like Mixmaster Mike makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
See how I pulled it back around? See how I pulled it back around?
I like that. Well, Damon, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much again for your time and for bringing a Mixmaster Mike into our consciousness. Really appreciate that.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Is there anything? Sorry, go ahead.
Anything else I want to say? Is that what you're going to say?
I was going to ask if there's anything you want folks to know about the record, about where they can find it, any promotional stuff you got for us.
I mean, you can find it in a record store. If you can't find it in the record store, tell them to order it. But I just did a show in LA. I did a show in Chicago, record release show. I kind of am interested in what will happen, like organically, you know. So there might be some shows in England coming up, but I'm taking it as it comes. But I do have a question for you guys. I'm really interested and what I really appreciate is that when people review this record, jazz comes up, like they talk about like they might mention like hip hop beats or what have you. I don't think about the genre at all for what this record is. It never came to my mind. But I do appreciate being interviewed within the hip hop context, because for me, it's always been there, and it's a part of my upbringing. I've never tried to like make a hip hop record. Like that's, to me, I just do the thing that I do. And so I appreciated getting the email because I said, oh, then maybe this is visible to people that really pay attention to the genre.
Just based on, you know, things I've observed online on our social media, I'd say there's a portion of our audience that are hip hop heads that are definitely into this record.
Cool.
So I can affirm that. Yeah, I don't. In my mind, you know, hip hop has some of its roots in like spoken word and poetry, and the way you're sampling things is very much connected to, you know, hip hop's lineage. It only made sense to me.
Well, I appreciate that. It's nice to hear.
And also just the hip hop's influences, like it comes from the diaspora. Like so much of the diaspora is included in hip hop culture, in hip hop sound. And so to me, it's like, it's no question that this album will be part of that.
That's cool. That's interesting to note, because I'm always interested in the perception of the music that I make. And I know where it comes from, but the way that people frame it, you know, they even frame like Black Monument as like a jazz record, but to me, it's not a jazz record, or those aren't jazz records. They're just like Black people making some music, you know? So this is interesting to me, and I'm really happy to be here, and I enjoyed talking to you, and thanks for entertaining my Mixmaster Mike obsession.
It was lovely. Thanks for coming on.
All right, folks, this has been The Next Movement. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Peace.
Isn't it beautiful? All right. 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 Isn't it beautiful? All right.
Direct comes with disregard, surprising yet not unexpected. Still it falls with a boom, the same bash, the same crash. Make the many wreck. Comes with disregard, fall. Who can see the shapes and colors as they are, as they appear again? The hearts fall. The hearts fall.
Isn't it beautiful? All right.
Like the blue of the ocean, it's just a sky on its surface. The story unfolds and makes me feel safe, wrapped in love. or feel alone deep in the wilderness. The song peels back the leaf to reveal the smallest creature deserves